Well, want to welcome everybody again to the June issues meeting. We're excited. A couple housekeeping things. Everybody by now knows where the chat button is, but feel free to, if you've got comments, to put them in the chat, or you can always email. If you are not on the video but you're on a phone, feel free to email at info@columbiachamber.com. We are recording this. And we're also going to add this to our website this afternoon for everybody. If you've had to cut off and you want to see the rest of it, feel free to tune in. But we're delighted on behalf of Mark James, the chair of our Public Policy Committee. We are delighted that y'all are here. We want to welcome Beth Bernstein. Beth, thank you very much for taking the time this morning to be with us. I know she has been hanging with her 16-year-old daughter for a couple of days and gotten a little post-COVID response out of town. So thanks for coming in. And a little bit of background on Beth. Beth was elected in 2012, if I remember correctly. And this is she's running unopposed yet again for her 5th term of the House. She's done a phenomenal job for us in Columbia in the Midlands, representing District 78. She serves on the Ethics Committee. She serves on Judiciary Committee of the House. But one of the most important thing about Beth, other than being an attorney and serving in the House, is she's a leadership Columbia grad of 1998. So Beth, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So I always enjoy when I get an invitation to talk to the Columbia Chamber. And I look forward to having an engaging conversation because of the upcoming primary and everything that we've been seeing and what's been going on in the nation, and particularly in our state and in our backyard. It's been something that I never have seen, and something that I never thought that I would see. And it hurts my heart, everything that happened in Minneapolis and what we saw in Charleston and Columbia over the weekend. I think that while it's very sad, the violence and the destruction is unacceptable, but we do need to look towards solutions and finding ways to heal wounds. And, you know, I don't think this topic is for that. I mean, you know, what we're going to discuss today, but I did want to make sure that I had some words to say on that.
Well, while we're on that topic, I think it's timely. I mean, as we've seen protests in 3 days, and I've been downtown Columbia for those 3 days, it's been, it really has been interesting. But from a county perspective and the city perspective, I think for the most part, I'd love to get your thoughts, but I think the response has been good from our law enforcement. Really kudos to Chief Holbrook and Sheriff Lott, done a great job with partners from SLED and Lexington County and Newberry County, and Department of Corrections have all stepped in as well. So all have ties to the State House because they all get some type of funding from y'all. But
everybody does.
Yeah, that's right. They've done a great job. Anything you want to add on this and what you think can come of especially the peaceful protest yesterday?
Yeah, and which was definitely something in the positive direction. I think we need to work together to find ways to, you know, heal these wounds. And clearly there's some work that needs to be done in the criminal justice system. Violence, looting, car burning, all of that is not the answer. But as a state, I was always so proud after the church shooting, how we came together and we healed as a state, but we also brought the flag down. And I think it was an example of what the victims' families, how forgiving they were. And I've just always been proud of our state. So it's a little unfortunate to watch the events. I was in Litchfield, and so it was through the news, and I was just surprised. I saw more of the King Street stuff in Charleston more than I saw what was happening here in Columbia. But we need to all work together to figure out how we can heal these wounds, you know, and support the peaceful protests, but not the violent eruptions that we've been seeing.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think this will definitely lead to some good conversations going forward. Let's pivot a little bit
Yeah.
and talk about. We're going to pivot one more time before we get to the topic that we really want to go talk about. But yeah, this the protests come to the heel. I think it was pent up frustration from a lot of people of being stuck at home and having to deal with COVID and obviously what happened in Minneapolis. So I don't think it was just one thing, but there were a lot of things that were at play, at least subconsciously. The COVID response to the state. I mean, we've all been dealing with this thing for almost 3 months. I think I'll be the first to tell you I'm extremely pleased with the response of Governor McMaster and the leadership that he has. I also it's been very thoughtful but want to get your thoughts on COVID response and also specifically from a member of the General Assembly, your thoughts on the role of the General Assembly going forward and what you think will happen in the coming weeks. Because I think y'all are coming back next week or 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Well, we haven't gotten any indication of any date that we're coming back. I do know we convened on May 13th. I think it was the 13th. Our last official day, sine die, was May 14th. And in order to continue with the state's business, we had to come back in and vote on a continuing resolution. And so at that time, we were able to extend the session of the General Assembly. And the Speaker of the House did indicate that we might come back in June, but we did reserve 2 weeks in September where we would come back when we had more clarity about what the state revenue and the situation of where we were from a budget standpoint. We also allocated significant money to the COVID response. And this is going to be how we're going to address the budget. Right now, we'll be having the continuing resolution, and I guess we're coming back in 2 weeks. I hadn't heard that, Carl, so thanks for informing me of that. But that's going to be our number one challenge. I was elected in 2012, so it was after the recession when we were dealing with deficits for the budget allocation and how to assess how we're going to assess the damage to the economy now. But what I've been told by colleagues who were serving during that time, it was very difficult because you were pitting agency against state agency and making cuts as painless as possible. But we know cuts is something that is a difficult job. And when we're going to have double-digit cuts, I mean, it's worrisome. So it's going to be very challenging for us in the upcoming year unless things start to really turn around.
Well, which is critical. One of the issues we've been having to address in Columbia and everywhere else, quite frankly, is getting business back to doing business. And we want to all be safe and be responsible in opening businesses. But it's vital to the trickle-down impact, which is funding government and even on the local level with accommodations and hospitality taxes, et cetera, means a lot for the state and bringing tourists back as well. For clarification, Beth, I think when y'all come back later this month, it's going to be dealing with the federal expenditures of monies that the 1.9 billion that the feds came down. At least that's what I'm hearing. So if you hadn't heard anything, it's just rumor mill, but I think they're trying to do something with those federal dollars before September. So FYI.
And that could sound right because the governor is working with the legislature and how that those COVID funds will be allocated.
Down. All right. We look forward to hearing more about the COVID response. I think it's important that the General Assembly really engage now, as their constitutional powers are to spend the money, allocate those revenues. So we'll circle back with you. We've got some issues there, but we want to be responsive as well. So we'll keep you posted where the chamber is on where we can spend those dollars. Let's talk about what we really want to talk about, which is Richland County. And you penned a letter back in April, earlier in the year, to our delegation asking for clarity on some vitally important stuff on Richland County elections. And then you had to subsequently send another letter. And I know this is a difficult issue and a difficult time for a lot of folks, but one, we've got to have trust and faith in our election process. I know my friend Craig Plank is actually tuned in today, and Craig resigned off the board because of some action, because of the lack of leadership on that front. So, and I totally respect Craig and his thoughts there. You want to talk about what led you to write the letter and what you think the response has been and your viewpoint on that?
Absolutely. And I'm so happy that Craig is with us, because I think Craig will be a very good voice on the state of affairs where we are right now. But as you said earlier, I was elected in 2012, and as we can all remember, the issues that we had in 2012. So Representative Kirkman Finley and I and Senator Thomas McElveen were all on the ballot in Richland County. And I remember the standing outside of St. John Newman in Wildwood precinct all day with lines and continuous lines. And it was fortunate that people were resilient enough to wait the 5, 6, 7 hours. My twin sister was at Pontiac. I mean, but it was unacceptable. And so I still remember the fallout from that. And since being elected, we have had 7 election directors in 7 years. And Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is an accurate number. And for Richland County to be one of the largest in the state, it is unacceptable that we can't run a smooth election. I mean, we're one of the worst. And because COVID complicates things, I was very concerned about the upcoming election for the primary, and I'm still concerned in November, because as we know, presidential election years are where the turnout is the greatest. And I wanted to get a handle on where we were. And Craig was always a great resource for me. I could always reach out to Craig, and he was very helpful and honest about what was happening. And so I thought it was important as a delegation that we tried to get county council, the elections board, and our Richland County legislative delegation together to ensure and figure out if there needed to be solutions to how we can make sure we could run a smooth election. And the first issue that should have been dealt with, which the board was charged with, was electing a director. And I think Craig can probably talk more about that in his frustration, but it was a year from when the board was appointed until now. And it was really one charge that they had, is to really get the elections director, and they failed to do that. And so we needed some answers from the election board. Some of my requests to convene a meeting fell on deaf ears. A little bit of the problem is we appoint the board as the legislative delegation, but it's funded by the county. So honestly, I think there's a little the county, because they don't have influence on who is the board, might struggle. And Craig, I want you to chime in here, with the funding aspect. But that's why I wanted all 3, the board, the county council, and our delegation, to get together to talk about and to make sure that this was going to be smooth, and really get specifics on what you are doing, and also about hiring the elections director. It was a little too late that we found out that contract negotiations broke down over, I think, a very nominal amount. And it's very unfortunate that we're going into this primary, and hopefully not the November general election, without a elections director, because you can't be expected to run a smooth election if you don't have an elections director. I mean, and that's the gist. So I rallied several, and these it's not just me that had the issues. You know, the delegation 16, I think it's 16 of us, and the majority of us are frustrated, and that's how I was able to rally. And it's bipartisan support to really put pressure on the Chairman Bales, to convene a meeting. And while I feel it was productive, it doesn't make me feel real good about how we're going to have an election on June 9th. I'm still very concerned about it, honestly.
Puts chills down my spine, quite frankly, hearing that. Well, not to put Craig on the spot, but I don't think, Craig, you're muted right now, but we'd love if you want to chime in, if you have anything to add to Beth, would be appreciated. No pressure.
You bet. And
Good morning, Craig.
good morning, Beth, Carl, and everybody. It's good to see everybody.
You
I'm out
too.
of town right now, and so forgive kind of the old look here. No, I think Representative Bernstein did a great job in summarizing that. It's always challenging when you're placed in a position of responsibility to step away from that. In my case, over this past year, it became increasingly frustrating to be able to make progress in what I felt was really important to get leadership in place, to straighten up some of the team, the staffing issues, so that we can have elections that we can feel confident about. And given Richland County's history, I felt it was vitally important, and it did seem, as Beth said, as our primary task to get this something stable in that position. And we put together a 20 candidate group. We brought it down to 5. We had it down to 2, and we had it down to a unanimous vote for 1. Unfortunately, there just wasn't negotiation really from the beginning of the offer until the end. And so the person we had, I felt was going to do a great job in addressing some of the challenges that were ahead. This is one where, the commercials where they say, okay just isn't good enough. I mean, that's kind of the situation we're faced in at the Elections Commission. And so I believe the candidate was one where, meticulous detail was one of her greatest strengths, and that's what we need. And with some of the carelessness that's occurred with missing ballots or misplaced ballots, you just can't have that election after election. And when you don't see that changing, and you're a person working hard to get those type of changes in place, eventually you have to make a decision to say, you know what, maybe the best way to instigate some radical movement on this is to step away. And so that was a tough decision, but I'm hopeful that will put a bigger spotlight on it and make this change. But I too, along with Beth, was concerned enough to say, you know what, this is going to be a bit of a train wreck coming in, just given the circumstances around the absentee situation. But in addition, just the ability to handle it and do it well. So we were very close to just the delays were well beyond what they should have been to hire somebody. That should have been done, in my opinion, in 90 days. It shouldn't take 8 months, but and then we lost it over a very small amount, unfortunately. So that's where I am. I've kept up with just following it, and I appreciate Beth and Kirkman and Nathan and several others on the delegation who've kept in touch, so that they're very concerned as well. And we do have that interesting relationship where you're appointed by or nominated and appointed by the governor, but then the county oversees it. So that can be a bit challenging, but it's time for Richland County to have someone at the helm who's going to do a great job. And I'm optimistic and hopeful that they now will find somebody. I'm hoping that my resignation will, and the attention it's brought will get someone quickly, but we will see. I am worried though.
Craig, let me ask you a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Carl.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up, because at our meeting, Chief Alston did indicate that they were going to hire someone by July 1. I think they were going back to the list of the candidates. Do you have any comment on any of that?
Yeah, my comment would be that that we had the best candidate. So unless
Yeah.
that best candidate is again the candidate, I wasn't personally, I wasn't really impressed with the others.
Okay.
And so I felt like the top two, there was a big difference between the top two and 3, 4, and 5, and there was a big difference between 1 and 2, in my opinion. And that's why I was pushing hard that we move this along, because you know when you've got people who are looking at making a move to the state, understanding what's ahead as it relates to the challenges of Richland County and its past elections, you know that's a big hill and some headwinds right off the bat. So you want to make sure that you're setting the table for success, and I would love to see it. I wish the commission the best to get someone in by that date. I don't know if you go back to the drawing board and I just don't know if that's possible. And that was another contributing factor to me stepping down was, you know what, if this pattern of process, if it continues to go as it is, I don't see it changing, but let's hope that it does.
Beth, what I was going to throw back at both, I mean, so Craig, stay close. Is there a remedy? Is there another structural way to do this? I mean, every county's functioning the same way, I would imagine, from their county election, appointed by the governor, funded by the counties. I mean, are we missing something in Richland County that others are not, or we just?
I'm not so certain that all of the delegations appoint the board. Craig, you might know better than I, but I think that's kind of an issue. We don't fund it, but we can kind of control it, honestly. I mean, I think that's the issue. And it's my understanding, I'm not sure if the other counties operate that same way.
Yeah, my understanding is they do. I don't know 100% if every county is that way. You know, I think if you look at why, because it does seem that was a frustrating piece to have. I think there's a long history of, I'll just say, dysfunction between the county and the commission itself once appointed, and where, you know, the paychecks for the commission are from the county, yet when the support of the board or county or the election commission team members need help, it's just there's a disconnect. And I think that was I was hopeful was another task in addition to leadership replacement. Permanent leadership was also, how do we bridge this and how do we repair the relationship between the commission and the county council, the commission and the county administrator, human resources, things of that sort. When you're not getting support with legal issues and you're on a tight budget, you know, all that type of dysfunction made no sense, especially since this is a chamber meeting, from a business person, a sole proprietor coming in where you've got to make decisions quickly. You've got to, you understand the importance of the need for these areas, these deficits. It's mind-boggling how slow and how discouraging it can be trying to move forward in that regard. But the challenge you have is if you have voter protests and you have the county council appointing the board so that they're in direct response and understand that, then how do you keep the integrity of the election when you do have the protests? So that's where I think this organically grew, to keep kind of a separation, if you will, and keep neutrality and things of that sort in place. So I got that, but here's what I will say is I do know that, you know, counties, Greenville, Charleston, some of the other counties our size, when we've been at meetings to get our certification and other meetings where you're among other election officials, this type of relationship doesn't exist. There's a lot of support and there's a lot of harmony that goes between the delegation to the county council to the elections, because everyone understands that needs to run smoothly. That's where it's a team effort as a county. I'm still troubled by why that hobbles along. And I think we've had because of what Beth said in the beginning with the multiple directors, it's hard to get some sort of traction and build the relationships, because let's face it, even though it's a hired and appointed process, there's a big political and communication elements to it. And I think that's another area where I felt like the candidate we had balanced in skill set, communications, community outreach, and the political element that comes along with this role. And when that falls apart over a very small amount and just the philosophy that it fell apart, that's when you kind of say, okay, how can this change? And maybe it's time to really get the spotlight going.
Craig and Beth, this is Mark James. Do either of you know the size of the budget in the county's budget that's run through the election commission and the number of employees? How big of an organization is it?
I believe it's at 13. So, I mean, some can change over the last month, but the budget runs around, it's an interesting budget process. I think the budget is like 1.8 million. And Beth, if I'm off a little bit on that, but the interesting part is that the county, the commission goes to the county council to get its budget approved, and they must fund it a certain amount. So they do that. And then there are reimbursements that are then received by the elections commission for conducting elections. And then those reimbursements go back through the county. And then the commission, which is part of the kind of the clunkiness of this, is then the commission must go back before county council to ask for, I guess, a completed funding of their budget to get the refunds back forward versus just putting it out in the front side. And that can just kind of cause the process to be a bit clunky along the way. And that's where another part of anytime you're going before the council and have a good detail what's needed, unfortunately, because of some of the history, there's not maybe the best of view on that. And so the budget tends to be at its minimum, and then you're kind of fighting back for the other pieces to make it whole based on the reimbursements.
Okay. Good question. Just for that, anyone else has questions, feel free to raise your hand or speak up or put it in the chat. We'd love to have some interaction with anybody that would like to comment. So feel free there. Going forward, I mean, as we're getting close to the election, obviously. Beth, obviously y'all are going to monitor it. Is the delegation planning any other action between now and election date?
Public action? No. I mean, not that I'm aware of.
I know you've hit your quota of 2 delegation meetings for the year already, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And we continue to make sure, and I think that's part of the disconnect too that Craig was referring to. I mean, as a delegation, we only meet one time a year, and most of us, and it's probably the ones who are newer to the delegation, think that that's unacceptable. When you look at other counties our size, and even other counties of small size, they meet more frequently than annually. And as you all know, I mean, we have so many boards and commissions with vacancies or with rollover terms, and I mean, it's something that we need to address, and it's frustration for a lot of us. The problem is the way our delegation works is by weighted voting. So the weighted voting is based upon how big your district is. So most representatives only have around a 4% weighted vote against a senator that if their district is within Richland County solely, they have more than, let's say, Senator Harpootlian, who has a little bit of Lexington, and Senator McLeod, who has a little bit of Kershaw. Their weighted vote isn't quite as large as Senator Jackson's and Senator Scott. So really 2 senators can kind of overrule the 11 House members. Yeah. You know, I'm not exactly sure the breakdown of the numbers, but let's say it's 11 House members and 4 senators, well, Thomas McElveen has a little bit, so 5 senators, then we're really outweighed. Our votes are outweighed, even though our representation by number, by straight up, 1-to-1 is greater.
Interesting.
So, I think talking to the senators, and particularly the ones that have more of the weighted vote, is helpful.
Wow. Lots to take in there. And that's a complicated process, and one that matters to everybody. We've got to have significant confidence in our election commission. So,
and that's why I think it's important that we make sure that, and I think this group is very cognizant of that, but that we do go out and vote. And I should point out, and Craig, you would probably echo this. I mean, I really don't think there's any nefarious, that we shouldn't question the integrity of our vote with the election board. It's just whether or not that they're handling it in a properly and competent manner.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's just a matter of having some stability, some consistency, and this is those who've been poll workers or been around elections. What you learn quickly, it's just a systems process, and it must be followed perfectly. But it's at the same time, as complicated as it can seem or be, and overwhelming as it may be in this election, it's still somewhat straightforward as it relates to just follow the perfect system. And that's the part that can be frustrating, is why with something that's so systems oriented, that can be really fine tuned and to be running like a well-oiled machine, keeps fouling up. And I think that's where leadership comes in. Strong leadership as the director position, and strong leadership in the commission side to help guide that. And like Beth said, it's interesting with the weighted voting coming from the nominations from the delegation. There's some who may want other people who may be able to come in and do that job that get overruled simply because of the weighted elements to it. That's more, Beth would be able to speak more to that than I would, but.
And I'll tell everyone in this group, Craig, the reason Craig was able to serve on the board is he was the Republican member of the board, because the way the rules work, you have to have one member of the minority party, and within our delegation, the Republican Party is the minority party, because he wouldn't have had the votes, weighted votes, to be the candidate, but for the fact that he was the Republican candidate. So the next person was another Democrat, traditionally the way they vote, or she or he voted. And that's how Craig was able to get the position, even and I had supported Craig, and there were a number of us that did. It's just our weighted votes weren't as strong.
Yeah. Quick question, Rob. New grandpa Rob Tyson has a question. Congratulations to you, Green, Rob. What are the reviews so far on the new voting machines? Do y'all have any thoughts on the new machines?
Me personally,
yeah.
Legislatively, and let me tell you, we did, when we convened a few weeks ago, we did, for the upcoming election, have COVID as a legitimate reason to vote by absentee. So effectively, anybody in the state can vote by absentee, mail-in, or in person, which I think was a step in the right direction because of COVID. But legislatively, the way we were voting, we had no ticket, nothing to verify that we had taken a vote. And so that was very concerning for all of us, and Kirkman and I and Thomas McElveen and some others. We were really pushing for another type of machine, where you actually physically handwrite your ballot and then put it in. But when I've viewed this machine, I mean, I think it's fine. Is it better than the other? I would disagree, especially for the amount of the money. But it's better than what we've had.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
It
and
makes sense.
I could add in just from Rob's questions, reviews. I think overwhelmingly people have been happy with them. I mean, there's still little quirks here and there, but the people like having that paper ballot that is once the ballot is marked, coming back out and then walking over. There's an extra step, but it's been moving pretty smoothly, pretty intuitive.
Good. One other question we had, does anyone know what drives the weighted scale? Is it population? Is it percentage? It's percentage of voters?
Population. So typically a Senate district is 100,000, a House district is 35 to 40. It'll be interesting when we have redistricting and how dense certain neighborhoods have gotten in Richland County, how those numbers are going to be reallocated. But yeah, absolutely. So Senator Jackson and Senator Scott, like I said, are wholly within Richland County. So they have the largest, and then Dick and Mia have a little bit less than them. And then Thomas has as much as we do. I mean, a House member. Which
natural plug, that's why the census is so important, as we have all filled out our forms already. I know 100% on this call, I'm sure, but keeping those numbers straight and allocating different folks and weights, I mean, it makes a big difference. So
and there's no change to the weighted voting. I mean, when I was first on the delegation, it wasn't that way. It was it could have been employed, but Senator Scott had pushed for that between 2012 and I can't remember when we started implementing weighted voting, and it puts us at a disadvantage for sure in filling these boards and commissions.
Good to know. All right, Beth, we've got a couple important races. I know you have gotten some mailings. You and I've talked. You got involved with District 8. Any thoughts on District 8?
I have. So this was Jim Manning's seat, and so this is an open seat. So this is a very important seat because it's. I do feel like COVID is probably going to help the incumbent just because of the difficulties in getting out and campaigning, but this is an actual open seat because Jim Manning is not running for re-election. And while Councilman Walker is my personal councilman, this District 8 encompasses a lot of my district. And so I think it's really important that we have somebody who is capable and competent and exudes the moral compass that we think that County Council needs at this juncture. And so there are 3 candidates running for that and 3 men. And I'm supporting, and several other elected leaders are supporting Hamilton Grant for that. And Hamilton is someone who was raised here. He's going to wants to represent the district he grew up in. He grew up in Spring Valley. His father, Tony Grant, was a banker, very established in this community. His mother really was the first African-American partner in a big medium, Rob Tyson. It was for, and Richard Gergel's firm, and so he's got a very good role models for him. And I think he would be the ideal candidate to help County Council, because as we know, County Council has its challenges as well.
Yeah.
And so Steve Benjamin, Mayor Coble, Senator Lurie, myself, Representative Thigpen, are all supporting Hamilton Grant. And it is a very important election, and because it is an open one, and there's a lot of energy behind him right now. So I feel confident that he'll be successful next Tuesday.
And Hamilton is a proud Leadership Columbia grad of, I think, 17. I think that's the year. So, well, listen.
Small business owners, and small business. He and his father are small business owners.
Yeah, both good guys. Well, thank you very much. The questions are dried up, but Beth, your time here today has been very, very good and helpful to us to understand what's going on. So, one, thank you. Craig, thank you for your
say one thing.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say one thing. I got some some information that I think would be helpful. If you are voting by absentee, you have until Friday to request it. If you do request it and you try to mail it back in, you're not going to get your ballot in time. So remember that. If you'd like to get your application, if you don't know the process, you have to you have to fill out an application to get your ballot. So it's like a 3-step process. If you get your application online, you can email it to the elections director. I spoke with him, and that email address to apply to get a ballot is graham.terry, Terry, at richlandcountysc.gov. That will expedite things. I personally had requested an absentee ballot, and Craig, you'll be happy to hear this, they are doing a very quick turnaround. So that's one thing in the right direction. If you wanted to do in-person absentee, 2020 Hampton Street, not in the council chambers, but at the elections office, you can vote in-person absentee Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and this Saturday from 9 to 1. If you fill out your absentee ballot, instead of mailing it in, you can physically take it to the local elections office. There will not be any satellite offices as we've had in years past, and I think that's due to COVID. And we also have consolidated, or they have consolidated, several of the precincts, because we didn't even address that with the poll worker shortage and so forth. And Henry has that information, and I think it would be prudent to post that, so you know if you are going to vote on Tuesday where your precinct is actually going to be. They've consolidated several different precinct locations into one. So I think all of that is important. And please make sure people understand the importance of these elections and that we do go out and vote.
Right. What I was going to lead with that too. We're going to the list of consolidated polling places will be on our website. We'll get that out. So keep checking back there. But that's really good information on getting absentee voting and making sure you know where you're going. So Beth, really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And insights and your friendship to us and the military in Columbia. We really appreciate it. So thank you all for being with us. We're going to be back soon, and thanks for taking the time to be with us. We look forward to getting back in person real soon. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Y'all have a good day.